The mess hall at Fort Calder was loud in the careless way only new recruits could manage. Metal trays clanged, boots scraped across the tiled floor, and laughter echoed too freely for a place built on discipline. Most of the veterans avoided this hour, choosing quieter corners or eating early. But she sat alone at a small table near the wall, posture straight, movements controlled, eyes calm, and O-rank insignia showed on her sleeves. No medals on her chest, just a plain olive jacket, sleeves rolled neatly, dark hair tied back with military precision. To anyone passing by, she looked ordinary, maybe even forgettable. That was the mistake. Point 5 recruits noticed her almost at the same time. They were fresh, loud, and still drunk on the false courage that came before real training broke a person down and rebuilt them. One nudged another, smirking. Another laughed under his breath. "Hey," one of them said. "Why is she sitting there like she owns the place?" "Probably thinks she's special," another replied. Women like that always do. They stood up together, trays abandoned, confidence growing in a pack the way it never did alone. No officer stopped them. No sargento intervened. The mess hall had gone briefly quiet in that instinctive way crowds do when trouble approaches. They surrounded her table. She didn't look up at first. "Mess halls for active personnel," one recruit said, leaning too close. "Not for washed-up paper pushers." Another circled behind her chair. "Yeah, maybe you should move, or we can help you." That was when she finally lifted her eyes. They were steady. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. "I'm eating," she said calmly. Her voice was low, controlled, carrying no challenge, only certainty. The recruits laughed. Point one of them reached out and nudged her tray, deliberately sloshing water close to the edge. "You hear that? She's got attitude." Around them, a few older soldiers stiffened. Someone whispered, "This isn't good." But still no one stepped in. The woman slowly set her fork down. "I'd suggest," she said evenly, "that you walk away." The tallest recruit sneered. "Or what?" Silence stretched. Somewhere, a chair scraped back. A veteran at another table stared hard, eyes wide with recognition. Though the recruits didn't notice, she stood. She wasn't tall, but she didn't need to be. The space around her seemed to tighten, like the air itself had snapped to attention. The recruits suddenly realized, too late, that something about her stance, her balance, the way her hands rested loose but ready at her sides, was not normal. "You really don't know," she said softly. Point one of them scoffed. "Know what?" Before anyone could answer, a voice thundered from the entrance of the mess hall. "Stand down." Now, every head turned as a senior officer had entered, his face pale, eyes locked on the woman. Not the recruits. He snapped to attention, as so did 3 others behind him. The entire mess hall froze. The recruits spun around, confused, their confidence collapsing in real time. The officer's voice was tight with disbelief. "Ma'am, permission to approach." She sighed just slightly. "At ease," she said. The officer obeyed instantly. Whispers exploded across the room. "Ma'am, at ease." One of the recruits swallowed hard. "Sir, what's going on?" The officer didn't look at him. His eyes never left her. "You 5, he said quietly, "have just made the worst mistake of your military careers." She turned her gaze back to the recruits. For the first time, there was something sharp in her eyes. Not rage, but memory. "I didn't want attention," she said. "I came here for lunch." She reached into her jacket and slowly pulled out a worn insignia, placing it on the table. A Navy SEAL trident. Not new, not polished, scarred, faded. "Legendary point," one veteran gasped audibly. Another stood without realizing it. Somewhere in the back, a soldier whispered her name, and others repeated it in disbelief. The recruits' faces drained of color. "You see," she continued calmly, "before you were taught how to march, I was being taught how to survive." The officer cleared his throat. "Recruits," he said, voice shaking, "you are in the presence of one of the most decorated operators this base has ever seen." The tallest recruit stammered, "We didn't know." "No," she interrupted. "You didn't care." She picked up her tray again, as if the moment was already over. "Disrespect doesn't disappear just because you regret it later." The mess hall was silent as a grave. She looked around the room then, addressing everyone. If you think strength comes from numbers, she said, you haven't learned anything yet. She turned toward the exit. Behind her, the 5 recruits stood frozen, careers already unraveling. And none of them realized yet just how legendary the Navy SEAL they had crossed truly was. If you're enjoying this powerful story, subscribe to our channel, Her Brave Stories, for more unforgettable tales of courage, respect, and strength. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The door of the mess hall closed behind her with a soft metallic click, but the silence she left behind was heavier than any shout. No one moved for several seconds. Trays lay forgotten. Conversations had died mid-sentence. 5 recruits stood in a loose circle where she had been moments before, their faces pale, their bravado stripped away as if it had never existed. Who? Who was that? One of them whispered. The senior officer finally turned, his eyes cold now. You will address her as Chief Morganhale, retired, and you will follow me. All of you. They didn't argue. They didn't speak. They followed like shadows. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the base in gold, but Morganhale barely noticed. She walked slowly toward the training grounds, memories pressing in from all sides. She hadn't been back to a base like this in years. Not since the injuries. Not since the funerals. Not since she decided silence was easier than being remembered. A younger lieutenant jogged up beside her. Mom, I'm sorry about what happened in the mess. She gave a small, tired smile. It happens. Yes, ma'am, but it shouldn't, she finished for him. That's why I'm here. He blinked. Here, ma'am. She stopped walking and looked out over the training field where recruits struggled through drills, sweat and frustration written on their faces. Command asked me to evaluate your new intake. They didn't tell me how. The lieutenant swallowed. Those 5 are part of the evaluation, she said quietly. In a nearby administrative building, the 5 recruits were ordered to stand at attention. Their hands shook. None of them dared speak. A colonel entered the room, followed by 2 men whose presence alone made the air feel heavier. One wore a chest full of ribbons. The other wore almost nothing at all. No decorations, no visible rank, just an aura that commanded instant silence. The colonel spoke first. You disrespected a veteran today. Yes, sir, they replied in unison, voices cracking. You surrounded her. You threatened her. And you did it because you thought she was weak. One recruit found his voice. Sir, we didn't know who she was. The man with no visible rank stepped forward. That, he said calmly, is exactly the problem. He turned to the colonel. May I? The colonel nodded. You see, the man continued, pacing slowly in front of them. Chief Hale was operating in combat zones before any of you could spell deployment. She led extraction missions under fire. She carried wounded teammates for miles. She stayed behind so others could get out. He stopped in front of the tallest recruit, the same one who had sneered at her. She was offered command. She turned it down. Do you know why? The recruit shook his head, eyes fixed on the floor. Because she didn't want power, the man said. She wanted responsibility. The door opened. Morgan stepped inside. The room snapped to attention instinctively. At ease, she said, and Owen relaxed. She looked at the 5 recruits. Really looked at them. Fear, shame, confusion, all of it written clearly. I'm not here to ruin your lives, she said. You're doing that well enough on your own. One of them swallowed hard. Ma'am, we're sorry. I believe you, she replied. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Action does. She turned to the colonel. Put them under my supervision for the remainder of the week. The colonel hesitated. Ma'am, are you sure? Very. The recruits' heads snapped up. You'll train with me, Morgan continued. Not to punish you, to teach you. The next morning, before dawn, the 5 recruits stood on the edge of the training field. Morgan waited for them, already there, stretching calmly as if time had no hold on her. Rule 1, she said. I'm not here to impress you. She led them through drills that didn't look impressive at first, balance exercises, breathing control, situational awareness. They scoffed internally until their muscles began to shake, until their lungs burned, until they realized they couldn't keep up. She never raised her voice. She corrected them with quiet precision. When one recruit stumbled, she caught him before he fell. Strength, she said, is knowing when to support. By the third day, they were exhausted in ways they'd never experienced. Not broken, focused, sharper, more aware. During a break, one finally asked, "Ma'am, why didn't you fight back in a mess hall?" She considered the question. "Because I didn't need to. They trained at night. They trained under pressure." She put them in scenarios where ego failed and teamwork mattered. That on the final day, she gathered them in a circle. "You think being a soldier is about dominance," she said. "It's not. It's about restraint, about recognizing worth before it's proven to you." She looked at each of them in turn. "You fail that test, but failure isn't the end." She stepped back and nodded once. Dismissed. They snapped to attention, sharper than they ever had before. "Ma'am," the tallest recruit said, voice steady now. "Thank you." She paused. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Be better." As Morgan walked away from the field, veterans watched her go, some with awe, some with quiet respect. She hadn't come back to relive the past, she'd come back to shape the future. And somewhere, 5 recruits finally understood that legends don't always wear medals on their chests. Sometimes they sit quietly in a mess hall, waiting to see who you choose to be. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel, Her Brave Stories, for more powerful, true to spirit tales of courage and honor. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.